All right, traders, welcome to your Friday video. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and it is November 8th. And as always, on Friday, I'd like to do not only the end of day video, but I also like to do a quick summary of the week's performance and just kind of use overall summary for the week. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that performance in just a second, but let's talk about what moved really today and kind of the takeaways for the day. So, I think again, seeing us kind of close, even though you can see future's still moving here a little bit, but up 15 basis points. What's I think noticeable here is that on the chop days, like we saw this morning, and there's been a couple of these headlines, right? These trade headlines that have been obviously on the positive side, but also on the negative side too. And it seems like the market just has changed a bit, right? And I had mentioned this a couple times this week that watch what happens on the chop days, the more choppier days. See if we actually start to lean more to the downside or if buyers are coming into this market. And what I mean by something has changed a little bit is on these choppy days, we're not going to the downside. We're actually seeing buyers step in one way or another. So I think that's different. We now have, I believe it's 5 weeks of straight gains in the market, but even those choppy days, right? So again, this is just today's price action and just kind of watching what we did here at the end of the day. Let's look at the daily chart. Now, I've been talking about this for the last couple weeks, right? With this breakout, we've got no resistance up here. I know some people are looking at the round number 3100 as resistance, so that could act as a consolidation zone or an area that basically an area that we chop around at a 3100, which is only three handles away from the high. I think what are we at, 3091 or nine handles to the upside. But there's a lot of different factors that are going on, right? You open up Twitter and people are saying, "Oh, this is the top. This is the top. Now we're going to turn down." What I've learned to do over time, over the last, when we have these rip ups in the market, is basically try to stick with it as much as you can. Of course, take profits when we get overbought. It's kind of the rinse and repeat. What I've been doing is basically, days where we're up, like, we had a couple days where we were up like 0.5% or so. I take off a lot of trades that I've been accumulating, and then I kind of wait for these chop days and notice where the call buying is and what people are doing on those days. But I've actually been adding on the choppy days, saying, "Hey, I'm waiting for a pullback," and we're just you just may not get that. We may get it, but you also may not get it. So one of the things, let me to finish the thought, is basically have the 5 period, or some people use the 8 period moving average on your chart. Notice we have not ducked under that this whole move since the beginning of October. What we had maybe one close. I mean, that's it. Again, watching this gray line, it's pretty hard to see on my charts, but notice we're not doing that. Even those choppy days where we look like we were going to, like this particular day on 1031, nope. So again, sometimes these swing ups, which I think we're probably getting, my hunch is that probably getting close to the end of this, but we've done this before, right? Where it's gone up more than you think it's going to go up. So just keep that in mind and try to keep, rolling out and up some trades, taking profits. Like today, I started a Microsoft trade today, and it's not that I want to take profits, but let's be reasonable, right? I mean, Microsoft, I said this morning, this was my setup in the morning, where I said, hey, I've been looking at this Microsoft now for a few days, and I would rather be in it than not in it. What I said was, just to requote myself, I said, in my own mind, I always try to put things in terms of probabilities. And I said that I think there was maybe like a 70% probability that this thing resolves itself to the upside, and maybe a 30% chance that it comes back and probably retest the top of value. And I said, I think what the smart thing to do, if you agree with me, is that you start a position, and if we happen to get that 30% of what, in my mind, I think was going to happen as a check back, then you add you add more to your position. But clearly, that's not happening. So at least you get in there with starting a position, and you go from there. And I took a target right at the end of the day in that trade because we don't know what's going to happen next week. And I'm in an option trade. I'm not in stock, right? So pretty nice looking there. So let me just get back on track for a minute with the indices, and then same thing with the Qs. IWM also nice little consolidation here, right? Got a little bit ahead of itself, and kind of letting the 20-day moving average catch up, right? That's the other thing that maybe people are noticing a little bit. So again, I think small caps are impressive, right? We're now above this. I've been liking to look at mid caps as well. Mid caps are getting close to this 371 version point of control up there, right? Which is back from up here. So I mentioned the Qs. Oh, I just wanted to mention one other thing. The other thing to note, why I think a hunch is that we're kind of getting close to the end, is because look at how far the 5 period is above the 20, right? There's some decent separation, right? If you want to overanalyze here for a second, you could see that there's a decent amount of distance, and you can look at other times, right? Here, when this has gotten extended above the 20, usually at some point. And again, I don't know when. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But at some point, the 5 comes back close to the 20. So we're pretty extended above there. So you can make that case for more profit taking. And it's tough. It's tough because I try to do that on Fridays. And, when you start to look at individual stocks, which we will look at some of them, it's tough to say, oh, geez, I'm going to just force myself to kind of take off a few trades here. But, yeah, I mean, what's the RSI at this point? It's a 68. So again, it's interesting. We have not gone to a 70 yet, right? Which I always pay attention to the indices when they get above 70. We're close, and we've been hanging around here, or just below 70 for a little while. So watch now. If we do get like a down day, if by chance we do get a down day, like down 1% or something like that next week, watch what happens. Watch to see if buyers come back in and kind of scoop up the price. Things on possibly discount. All right, another thing, again, just looking at for today, one thing that I noticed looking at market breadth was that at one point today there was a lot more declining issues in some areas, or it was kind of even, but things like the Nasdaq actually had more advancers than decliners. Same thing with the S&P, that kind of switched around midday, and the Dow as well. So good breadth. Percentage change from the open. So I'm going to review a couple of these charts in biotech, which I sent out a chart on Twitter earlier about IBB. Remember the difference between IBB and XBI? IBB is market cap weighted, so larger companies make up more of the ETF, and XBI is equally weighted. So it's not small cap biotech because the large caps are in there too. They're just all at an equal weight. Some people confuse that, but again, same thing. Sectors we're kind of showing risk on again, even though again yesterday was a small breather with market breadth. Market breadth wasn't great yesterday. Today it was pretty darn good, and again that's the small caps led from the open. The VIX, if we look at the put call ratio, there are some negative, things seem to be getting a little bit over the tips of their skis. With the VIX is down to a 12, right? So I said this a week ago too. I said, hey, I could imagine that we get back up to like at some point like a 14, 15 VIX, but we just haven't seen that yet. So again, you can look at past times. Sometimes we do this for a little while. We're kind of doing that now. So again, I would not be surprised if we get back to like a 14, 15 VIX. And again, that's why you want that cash on the sidelines to kind of take advantage of that, as always. But especially when we're doing something like this with the market breaking out. And if we get a retest, that's what I hear over and over as well. Oh, I've got cash on the sidelines. I need to get into this market. I need a dip. So what do you think is going to happen when we do get a dip? I think people will seize that moment, whether it's down 0.5%, down 1%. I think you're going to find people coming in, especially even if it's a couple day pullback. All right. So what? So where'd the put call ratio finish for the day? Probably, I guess not that bad. 78.78. So a little bit higher. So that's good. All right. So I mentioned a couple of the sector ETFs. So yeah, I mean one hell of a candle that biotech. I would love to see this group break out. Right. It's been doing well. It had a nice day here, and then one. These are not all inside days, but 1, 2, 3, 4 step back, and then that's a really nice looking move. And I think the same thing illustrated in XBI. So a lot of names, right? We saw some call buying in Biogen today. After consolidation, FGEN was this big name that had a study. Even though this thing is not wasn't able to claim the 200-day moving average. We'll watch this name next week. Also, like a beaten up name that we were watching today in the trading room was up 36% today. This is Clovis. Look at the volume, by the way, in this thing. So of course, this is the weekly chart. It slid a lot. Big volume today. Maybe this thing could get going a little bit. You could use it. You could, if names that are in downtrends are tricky. But if you want to use the 50-day moving average, which is basically where it started, you could use that as your stop, which is unfortunately pretty far down there. Or if you want to use this virgin point of control, which is 5, that could be a stop price for you in Clovis. What else? I mentioned this chart AMRN, which I like as well, which also saw some call activity today. I think there's a big call spread that went up. Looks pretty good. Somebody just informed me that they have data next week, so maybe that name might move a little bit with that. All right. So what else? The biotech. I did want to go over the performance. So again, I mentioned 5 weeks in a row of gains. The standout out of the major indices was the Dow, which I had talked about that in the weekend member video. But again, everything. Small caps. Keep in mind, small caps were up 2% the week before, so up 0.6%, not too shabby. Again, I've talked about now until I've been blue in the face about international markets participating and that really good global breadth that we're seeing EM and international emerging markets. International development. It's been a long week. International development week. Oh, look at that. There was a virgin point of control taken out. I am long this DBEF, which has been working pretty well, breaking out. Again, international developed. We've been seeing a lot of inflows to, a lot more than usual into international ETFs. Japan has been seeing a lot of inflows. EWJ, I think there's about $500 million of inflows over the last week. And I think that's the second week of inflows in Japan. I don't hear too many people talking about that one, but a lot of inflows there. I thought it was interesting today that software kind of picked up a little bit, right? Software has been pretty dormant. Funny that I think part of that was due because you talk about, the negative trade headlines. Software has been it is what it is. I truly believe that software has been a hiding place away from the trade war. So you start to talk about them not rolling back tariffs. A little bit of a nice move, a nice outperformer on the day. And this chart actually does not look bad here. Little consolidation here. And it's following the rising 200-day moving average. So that's not bad looking. But yeah, a lot of names, I was looking at Okta today, but it seems like a lot of these names have been, at this point, pretty beaten up. And that's what you want to have happen when, a group that was super, super overcrowded. This Okta's not looking great. This one is not looking bad. Paycom, mentioned Microsoft already. Salesforce, take your eye off Salesforce. And it's actually looking pretty good here. Weekly chart also never really fell into value for more than a couple weeks here and there. Right? We want to see things above value. So again, nice to see that happen. Again, that's what happens when a group gets really, really overcrowded. It gets hit pretty hard, and it usually takes a while. It's usually not a snapback rally. All right. Energy names, China's internet names, which I also got long. Banks. So again, very risk on, I would say, because if you look at the names, right, you got a lot of sectors that were up, over 2%. Semis were also in there again. I mentioned financials. Transports were up 3% for the week. Oh my God! How many rails did we see with bull risk reversals? A lot of them, like we saw a big order in UNP yesterday, but keep in mind that big order, they didn't put any money down. So I'll explain what this means very briefly because I want to keep this video somewhat short because it is now the weekend. But see what I mean here? They bought these January 195 calls and they sold the January 155 puts. So if UNP just kind of stays where it is, they actually collected 11 cents. So that's a credit that they received for putting that trade on. And if it goes up past 195, which is a pretty decent move, then so it is a bullish trade, but they're looking for something really, big to take place, and they'll get rewarded handsomely if that happens. But we also saw they saw the same thing in CP today. These charts are looking kind of very similar. I'm long CSX, by the way, in cash, but CP, right, which is another rail name, same type of trade. March 260 calls go up versus the 210 puts. So again, they're looking for new highs, like way up here. That would be probably if a trade deal gets done. I don't know what phase that even means, but that's one way, not a bad way to kind of think about it. To put on a trade, to structure a trade. If something really exciting happens, like a major trade deal, you would imagine that this group is going to get going. So again, we saw that saw a similar trade in CSX. So various different rails. So looking over to the worst performers, like I mentioned, this was risk on this week. Look at the areas that sold off: gold miners, utilities, home builders, which are really trade sensitive. Notice I've got TLT highlighted up here, down 4% this week. Big breakdown. As well as gold down 3.6%. International is kind of mixed. You had some areas like Latin America get really beaten up. Greece was down too. I don't know what that's about. You actually had some worse performers than, but only a few. Like once you get past the really underperformers, and again a lot. Also Peru down 3.3%. Brazil, like I said, 4.6. But once you get past those, you don't really see too many names down 1%, and looks like it was some pretty good names up here. So again, mentioned Japan. Take the FX out. DXJ up 2.7%. HEDJ. So again, that's perfect, right? These top performers, if you put HEDJ together and DXJ, you get this DBEF, right? It's international developed. So again, a lot of Europe and Japan, and they strip out the FX. So again, I'd like to see my names on the top of the list. And then a few other areas in there. Taiwan, want to see one of the best international areas? There you go, EWT. Let's just look at Japan without the FX. Yeah, it looks pretty good. VPOC up there at 56. All right, guys, so that's it for this weekend. I will be putting together as normal a weekend video I'll show you my, I was going over this earlier today. This was the watch list that I provided over the weekend. And I think pretty good. We had Adobe in here. ATVI did not work, did not break out. I put a video together yesterday for members on earnings, and I mentioned I did not like ATVI because it had failed so many times. AYX did not really work. Berkshire was a wonderful trade. Woohoo! Beyond is my short, which is still working. CSX, already mentioned them. So again, put this together on the weekend. Deere, Emerson, GE, fabulous. Home Depot hasn't done anything. K-Web worked really well. MRVL is consolidating up here. Microsoft worked today. OLED, interesting, a lot of consolidation for OLED. PAGS did not work. PayPal, I have my eye on it. Didn't do anything with it today. Regeneron certainly worked. Put that one on the watch list last weekend. This one did not work. I got stopped out on a trade. STNG. I did try a trade in that one. UNP. So again, I had two rails. So look at. Do you see how we're setting members up for the week ahead? Some really nice performers. Notice that I have a lot of industrial names on there. All right. So if you are not a member of Tribeca Trade Group, here's my quick mention. And of course, everything that we're talking about in this video is for information purposes only. But you can go ahead and sign up, go to our products. And if you choose to sign up, you sign up for a month. And if you hate it, tell me after a few weeks, and I'm happy to give you your money back. All right, that's how it works. I don't do any trials or anything like that because I get a bunch of yahoos in here. But yeah, sign up, and if you don't like it after a few weeks, let me know. Let me know why, and I'm happy to give you 100% of your money back. All right, guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.